Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jenny Johnson.
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
And I see Diane giggling at me because I moved
Yeah,
my
that's
glasses.
exactly what I was laughing at.
It's always one of those things. So I'm going to need my glasses because we have a script tonight to go by. So I will need them to be able to read from the script. But I could see myself in the camera and I could see the reflection of the light from the computer screen. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm not looking at the script. I should maybe not have the glasses on my face.
No, we've done that before. We thought about doing a blooper reel where we were like playing with our glasses, take them off, take them on. They look this, like that. And we did that for about, what, 5 or 10 minutes one time. And it's like, this is ridiculous. But
When we first started doing everything on camera, and we were just like, but now I'm to the point where rather than trying to blow up anything that I'm looking at, scripts, notes, whatever, to like 50 times bigger than it needs to be on the screen,
like I do right now.
I'm just wearing the glasses. And I apologize to viewers who are watching this on YouTube that there's the glare in my glasses. I haven't quite figured out. I mean, the only way to really eliminate it is to hold my head in certain positions, and that's not
Yeah.
practical for talking to everybody. So it is what it is. But I am recording from my new recording space again. So trying to decide, I went back and looked at last week's episode for a couple minutes. I almost never rewatch them after we record them. I'll listen to them in the car and I'll do the audio version for us. But I almost never rewatch them. But I just wanted to see how it was. I think I'm still working on lighting situations going on back here, but it is kind of fun knowing that while we're recording, I have all these books about cemeteries,
Hmm.
including books from many of our authors who have been featured on the show. They are back here and all up here and down here because there's a lot of them. So it's my own little
Did
corner.
you did the cutest little reel of your studio on Instagram.
I did. I should put that one on.
Oh,
I only put that on my personal stuff because not only is this the recording space now, so now I'm not in the dining room like I've been for 6 years. It's also our guest bedroom, which we don't have a ton of guests on a regular basis, but on occasion we do. And it's also my costume room when I'm doing costumes for shows. So it's the smallest bedroom in our house, and it's doing the most work. Like I said in my reel, it's the guest bedroom, the recording studio, the costume room, and it is still storage for our oldest, for Sarah's, all her stuff that she hasn't taken with her since she moved out. Eventually, she plans to get some of the stuff, but she lives in a roommate situation and she's
right.
just kind of holding off until she has something more permanent. So until then, like the closet is pretty much all her stuff, but it's a great little space. I'm glad to have it. So it's nice to have a space dedicated. We've been doing this podcast for 6 years now, or nearly 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have a dedicated space in the house that isn't sort of the main hub of the house where in the past I've had to have everybody, we'd like scramble to have dinner and all that. And then I was like, okay, everybody has to be quiet. You can't move around the house. You can't do anything. So to have it upstairs in a corner out of the way where we can close the door and then the rest of my family can do what they're doing no matter what else we're doing or how many
We,
guests we have or what time of night we're recording. It's great.
I think
So
it's full.
today we have a cemetery. I've been to Boston many times. I've never been to this cemetery, although it's on the bucket list. But we're going to start with, what do E.E. Cummings, Lucy Stone, and Joseph Walcott have in common? They were all laid to rest in one of Boston, Massachusetts' most enchanting, like it's magical, burial grounds, Forest Hills Cemetery. Forest Hills Cemetery is a beautiful historic spot in Jamaica Plain, Boston. Which is one of the Boston neighborhoods. It was founded in 1848 as Roxbury's Town Cemetery. And if you're familiar with Boston, it's right next to Franklin Park, which is part of the famous Emerald Necklace Park system, although the cemetery was created 30 years prior to this whole park system being developed, by the one and only Frederick
Mhm.
Law Olmsted, who is the one who designed that park system.
And so many other park systems, because we were talking about it before the show started, going, I know that name's familiar. I know that name's familiar. So we Googled it real quick. And of course, Frederick Law Olmsted designed Central Park. And then living in Colorado, I knew there was a small connection. And his sons actually designed like the Broadmoor Hotel or five-star hotel that's out here. And I think there were some other things, but we just were looking really quick. So it's just
Mm-hmm. He also designed the grounds at the US Capitol in
Mm-hmm.
Washington, D.C. And there's some places in like he was kind of all over the US
Right.
when he was working. So you'll hear, and I know we've mentioned him before in other episodes when we've talked about other things he's designed. But yes, he did all of this work in Boston, but not on this particular cemetery.
So if you are on social media, the many sculptures and gravestones scattered throughout the 275-acre cemetery are often featured in photos and videos. It is in this cemetery where you can find the contemporary sculpture path. Just love the name of it. Established in 2001 as a small permanent collection, as well as works on loan for a year or more. Some of the well-recognized monuments, including resting benches, which are two Victorian-style unmade twin beds made of concrete and steel. According to the artists, Danielle Krcmer and Lisa Osborne, the bed is a place of conception, sleep, sickness, healing, and eventually death. A bed, a place to rest on a daily basis, is a need common to everyone. I just love how they saw a bed as something like that.
Right.
In response to the environment of Forest Hills, we chose to make benches shaped like Victorian beds to play on various interpretations of the notion of a resting place. The concrete suggests an eternal nature, the bed, a place to sit, to rest. Oh my God, that's beautiful.
And it's so funny because this is kind of what led to this episode is I've seen these particular sculptures pop up on Facebook and Instagram and other social media a lot. And sometimes, now there are plenty of creators out there who've gotten this correct, but there are several who are like, this grave, it's not a grave. There's nobody buried where these beds are. These are just a sculpture representing all of these things that Dianne just said. But they're really cool looking. And I love the fact that the creators decided to go with the Victorian theme
Yeah.
to coincide with the cemetery itself. Like they do, they look like two very cute little twin beds, and you've got one facing one way and one facing the other, but they're like side by side. So if you were laying in the bed, your head is at one end and the other person's head this way, and you could have a conversation with them like at a sleepover. But you know, there's like a cherub. I know one of them has like a little cherub carved into the headboard, and I don't know if the other one's exactly
oh
the
my
same, but
gosh.
they're so cute. And there's like a pillow on the ground, a concrete pillow on the ground next to one of them. It's just very sweet and very representative of
What
like
a
their
neat
whole
idea.
concept is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Another popular series of sculptures that is part of the sculpture path is created by Christopher Frost is called Neighbors. It's miniature concrete houses representing the real houses of actual people. Frost said, I conceived Neighbors as a way to address ideas of the physical home before and after death. The piece compares the dwellings of individuals in life and the dwellings in parentheses created for them after their deaths. Each concrete building is a replica of the home of a particular person buried at Forest Hills. I chose structures from the thousands of possible residences in order to include a variety of architectural styles. And as somebody who loves miniatures and dollhouses,
Mm-hmm.
these sculptures are fabulous. Just as the house's architecture reflected the diversity of their occupants' backgrounds, social status, ethnicity, and other traits during their lifetimes, so the architecture of their monuments and grave sites reflects those traits after their deaths. In most cases, I was able to find and copy buildings that still exist today, suggesting that the architecture left behind and then re-inhabited by the living can carry the memories of those who have passed on. So, and then there's a list of who the houses represent. So you have the residence of Charles Varney Whitten, who was a merchant and he lived from 1829 to 1897. Mary Hunt, who was a temperance leader. She lived 1830 to 1906. John A. Fox, an architect, 1836 to 1902. Joseph H. Chadwick, who was an industrialist, whose Gothic Revival Mausoleum is on Fountain Avenue. He lived from 1827 to 1902, and it was obviously very wealthy. Ralph Martin, a wagon driver who perished in the Great Molasses Flood. Samuel S. Pierce, a grocer from 1807 to 1881, and Anne Sexton, who was a poet from 1928 to 1967. So a variety, like you said, a variety of people, professions, everything. And these little houses, and they're built up on, I don't have any pictures here, but I'll try and put some on our social media. They're like on different levels where they're at. So, and then the trees are growing up around them, everything. It's just this little village of neighbors with all these different houses. It's so cool. It's so
That
cool.
is so cool. And brilliant how they're using the cemetery to and as a sculpture garden, that somebody was that creative to see it's more than just a burial ground. I think it's brilliant.
I love it.
Yeah, we got to put it on. This is on a bucket list. None of these sculptures mark any graves. So, but they are a tribute to the importance of art dating back to the founding of the cemetery. As stated in the Forest Hill website, long before Boston had public parks, Forest Hill Cemetery was created to offer visitors a special place where they could enjoy a magnificent landscape while remembering friends and family. Sculpture became an essential feature of this environment as people commissioned local artisans or prominent artists of the time to create individual and family memorials. No visit to Victorian Boston was complete without a trip to Forest Hills to see the latest in fashionable art and architecture. All of what we now perceive as historic sculpture was contemporary in its day. The Trust began exhibitions of contemporary sculpture and site-specific installation work to revive the 19th century practice of engaging artists to design works for this unique landscape. I tell you, whoever's in charge of this cemetery needs to be commended.
This, like I said, this started in 2001 and they've continued the practice of it. And there's some other really cool, I would have loved to have featured like all of these sculptures because there's really neat ones. And just like I said, the thought process behind all of these sculptures and what the artists were thinking when they created them is so amazing and so brilliant.
Yes. I mean, it is. It's brilliant. Can you imagine going today and dressing in Victorian outfits and to stroll among the cemetery?
Oh, yeah. And what's really cool, I mean, some of these sculptures are definitely more modern. The two that we featured are less so. But again, they all make that connection of art and life and death and nature and all the things that when we talk about cemeteries historically being the first sort of public park areas, that's what all of this embodies. And I love that they said, let's continue that tradition. So again, even though these particular sculptures along the sculpture path do not mark anyone's graves, they're very representative of life and death and nature and all of the things that we celebrate inside of a cemetery. Henry A.S. Dearborn was the driving force behind Forest Hills Cemetery. You might know him from his work as president of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society, where he actually designed the landscape of Mount Auburn Cemetery, which was America's first garden cemetery. By 1847, he was mayor of Roxbury, and he stayed in that role until he passed in 1851. At the time, Roxbury was feeling a lot of urban pressure, and Dearborn stepped in and convinced local leaders to back the idea of a new rural cemetery. What's cool is that Forest Hills wasn't like Mount Auburn or most other rural cemeteries. It was a city project from the start. So not just a board of wealthy individuals saying, let's create this big cemetery. This was a city project. And it was truly for everyone, any religion, any social class, any ethnic group. They even set aside lots for paupers right alongside the plots that people purchased. So you could have somebody who had absolutely no money, no property, nothing to their name, buried next to the wealthiest citizen of Boston, the way it was set up. A lot of famous folks are buried at Forest Hills. We're talking statesmen, soldiers, industrialists, social reformers, artists, poets, you name it, they're there. And because the cemetery took this really democratic approach to burials, you've got people from every corner of society resting side by side, which is cool.
That's very cool. The spot they picked for the new cemetery was actually farmland, but it had all the right natural stuff going for it. Rolling terrain, a few ponds, plus a mix of open fields and thick woods. perfect for a rural cemetery. You could see Boston to the north from the hills and the Blue Hills off to the south. Dearborn teamed up with Superintendent Danielle Brims to lay it all out. They went with winding, curved roads and natural-looking plantings, exactly what you would expect from rural cemetery design. By 1860, they even set up a nursery right there on site, growing both native plants and exotic ones for the grounds. One of the real highlights, once it was done, was Lake Hibiscus, a 4-acre lake near the middle of the cemetery that was finished in 1861. Forest Hills is still a working cemetery today, but it's also a historic site, an open-air museum, and a huge green space that doubles as an arboretum. It was added to the Natural Register of Historic Places in 2004.
It's so cool. And what I was thinking about this because when I was reading about how it was designed, so again, this was at the beginning of the garden cemetery movement. And this was definitely before they decided to start regulating who, what, and where, and when, and how things were laid out. Of course, it was meant to be more natural and everything, which also means the reason there are so many really cool sculptures and monuments in the cemetery is they didn't have the regulations yet to say you can only use this style or this style. So there are, 200, it's funny, a couple of things I read said 250 acres, but the cemetery's website says 275. So that's why I'm going with the 275 acres. But if you think about it, over 200 acres where for the longest time, families said, this is how I want to memorialize myself or my loved ones. And they kind of did almost everything. So if you could imagine it, it's probably in that cemetery as far as the grave marker goes. So of course, we want to share a few of the stories that are buried at Forest Hills. And we are sadly going to begin with the graves of 2 children, but that's because these are some of the most recognizable graves from the cemetery. Again, you'll find the pictures of them or videos of them all over social media. The first is little Gracie Allen, whose grave is marked by a statue of the little girl enclosed in a glass case to protect it from the elements. The statue is carved of white marble and depicts young Gracie dressed in a frilly Victorian dress tied with a sash at the back and an oversized bow, and she wears button-up boots on her feet. I'm going to add a picture here, so if you're on YouTube with us, you'll be able to see it. Otherwise, you'll have to either go watch it on YouTube for those folks, or I will have these posted to our social media as well, so you can go and see it. But you can also find this particular grave on so
that's
many.
what I was thinking of when you mentioned it.
Yes, and I'll block myself out here so you can see it better.
I can think that someone thought so far ahead to protect her.
Right, protect that marble because she is carved for marble. Her sweet little face is framed by short bangs, and then there's little ringlets that come down on the side. In her right hand, she holds a wilting bouquet of flowers to symbolize that her life was over far too soon. She stands on a marble base carved with her name, Gracie. Gracie Sherwood Allen was born in 1876. She died just before her 5th birthday from whooping cough in 1880. Her parents, William H. Allen and Emily J. Allen, commissioned the statue of their daughter by sculptor and poet Sidney H. Morris, who's best known for his bust of Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and President Grover Cleveland.
The second child is Louis Mieusset, who, like Gracie, was just 5 years old at the time of his death. His grave is also marked by a marble statue featuring the child's likeness and is also encased in glass. In 1886, little Louis was out in a small boat near the edge of a pond when he spotted his pet rabbit running along the bank. He wanted to bring the rabbit with him, so he reached out for it, but he lost his balance, fell out of the boat, and drowned. That heartbreaking last moment, exactly what his mother, Louise Helia Mieusset, chose to commemorate at her son's final resting place. Louis is seated in a wooden raft with a coiled rope on the front and seashells at the back. His first name is carved inside the back of the little boat, which is floating atop waves of water. Louis is dressed, as was the fashion of the day for small boys, in a sailor suit that was actually more of a dress. One leg is crossed beneath him, while the other dangles over the side of the boat. His head is taught with curly hair. In his right hand, he holds a small net, while his left hand rests atop a seashell. On the base of the monument is the following inscription: My only darling child, Louis Ernest Mieusset, born December 21st, 1881, died September 26, 1886. A mother's tribute of affection.
It's such a sweet little monument. And again, just like Gracie, at the time that it was erected, they did put that glass
Wow.
around it to help protect it. So you can really see if you go online and you can find so many pictures of both of these sculptures. You can see all the tiny, tiny details that were carved into both of them, like the wrinkles in their clothes, and like on Gracie's, the little buttons on her boots, and the bows in her hair and on the back of her sash. There's just so much detail, and they're both such beautiful tributes to these children. According to the Jamaica Plain Historical Society, also erected with the monument was a marble bench with a movable drawer that has since been removed, where the grieving mother could come to clean the glass, polish its brass fitting, place flowers, and do other duties as she saw fit. Due to financial reverses, though, Mrs. Mieusset's private income ceased, and she went to work as a domestic on Beacon Hill. She lived on Kirkland Street in the South End, becoming increasingly frail, but ever attending her son's grave by scrimping and saving. Perhaps the most lovely element about this tale is that it has no ending, for even after the death of his mother, whose grave is not specifically marked, fresh flowers are left at the site almost daily, anonymously. Even stakeouts at the site have never revealed who it is that keeps the site so dutifully.
Oh, that is so sad.
Yeah. So somebody, I mean, she obviously loved her son very much, but others have kept up the tradition of visiting him. And it's just so sweet.
Well, and she's not specifically marked either. And that's
yeah.
sad.
And I don't know. I don't know if she's buried near him or if she's somewhere else in the cemetery. It didn't say, but her grave is not marked, probably because at that point she didn't have the funds to have her grave marked.
Be interesting to see what happened after Louis died, why her circumstances might have changed.
Yeah, I didn't dig too deep into it. This was just,
right. No, it'd be,
But maybe that's what we should do.
Might be a big story there. One of the most visited grave sites at Forest Hills is that of Edward Estlin Cummings, better known to the world as the poet E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, studied Latin and Greek at Cambridge Latin High School, and picked up both a BA and an MA from Harvard. He decided to be a poet as a kid and wrote a poem a day from age 8 to 22. By Harvard, he was already going avant-garde, tossing punctuation, breaking syntax, treating poems like visual objects on the page. He volunteered as an ambulance driver in World War I France, got detained in an internment camp for messing with censors, and turned that experience into his first book, The Enormous Room, in 1922.
And by messing with censors, they meant he and another soldier were writing some pretty interesting things in their letters that were being censored. If you know anything about World War I or II history, letters were censored before they were sent home because you didn't obviously want to give away any details that might, pertain to the fighting and stuff. And they were putting all kinds of stuff in their letters that they really shouldn't have been. That wasn't harming the war, but they were still being very naughty, these two.
His first poetry collection, Tulips and Chimneys, dropped in 1923. To the 1920s, he cemented his style, spare, precise poems with words eccentrically placed, made up words and grammar used however he wanted.
Forget the rules.
For example, if or because as nouns, lowercase letters, the whole thing. Critics called him everything from a daring original poet to a brilliant 20-year-old. who never grew up, but readers loved him. As Randall Jarrell put it, no one else made experimental poems so attractive to everybody.
And for anybody who doesn't know, so his name, E. E. Cummings, he didn't capitalize it when he would write it. Everything was lowercase. That was just one of his little eccentricities that he had with poetry. What was Cummings really about? Individuality. He attacked most people, that's all one word in his words, and herd thinking and championed love, childhood, flowers, old school themes made new without irony. His early love poems were openly erotic and meant to shock the 1920s. Later, love in his work got more spiritual, even religious, and some critics called some of them among the greatest love poems of any era. That says a lot because there's a lot of love poems that came long before him that are considered the best. He also wrote the play Him and Me, a scathing travel diary about the Soviet Union that he called an uncircus of non-creatures. By his death in 1962, he was considered one of the masters of poetry and language. And again, I've put, although it's turned around, I just realized, but there's a picture of his grave. He is actually buried in the plot, his wife's family's plot. So if you're looking for his grave, the stone that marks next to it says Clark. And then his little stone flat marker is in the ground next to that. And it has just his name and date of birth and date of death. Nothing fancy. But just like other writers and other plates that are buried in other cemeteries, people do sometimes leave pencils and things like that at his gravesite to honor him. And then, of course, I was able to include a photo of him. This looks probably a little bit later in life. I'd say late 40s or 50s, judged by the way he's dressed. But definitely a very interesting gentleman he was.
Another fascinating story buried at Forest Hills is that of Amy Beach, who lived from 1867 to 1944. She was a huge deal in her lifetime, then kind of forgotten, and now she's finally getting her due again. And as you can see besides Jenny, there is the lovely photo of Miss Amy. She was actually one of the first American composers to get international acclaim, and she did it while being mostly self-taught. She published over 300 pieces, and people called her the Dean of American Women Composers. She was a total prodigy, singing harmony at age 2, writing waltzes at 4, playing Beethoven and Chopin by 7. Born in 1867 in New Hampshire, her family moved to Boston so that she could study. At 16, she played Boston Music Hall, and at 18, she debuted with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. But touring wasn't proper for an upper-class woman, so both her mom and later her husband shut that down. She could only do 2 charity concerts a year. So she pivoted to composing, which her husband did support. Since women weren't allowed to study in Europe like male composers, she taught herself by literally copying and memorizing whole symphony scores. She said it was like a medical student's dissection. That is
Can you imagine trying to memorize an entire score like that? That's just like, I can barely read music as it is, but to be able to look at an entire score and then put it to memory so that you can go back and write your own. Whew.
But to not be allowed to do what you wanted to do is just really sad.
Her big break came in 1892 when the Handel and Haydn Society performed her Mass in E-flat major, making her the first American woman recognized for a large-scale orchestral work. That same year, the Symphony Society of New York played her Ellen D. Wolken, the first piece by a woman they'd ever done. So before that, only men. In 1893, she wrote Festival Jubilate for the World's Fair. Then in 1896, her Gaelic Symphony was the first symphony by an American woman performed by a major orchestra, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, which she was familiar with. She'd worked with them before, but they actually took one of her pieces this time. After both her husband and mom died in 1911, she finally toured Europe for 3 years and then came back to the US and split her time between Cape Cod, New York City, and the MacDowell Residency, performing in winters and composing in summers. She never formally taught, but she lectured, wrote teaching pieces, started beach clubs for kids, which was music clubs, and co founded the Society of American Women Composers as its first president. She died in 1944, and in 2000, she became the first and only woman composer named on Boston's Hatch shell.
Yeah, I think when I go to bed tonight, I think I'm going to find some of her music and listen to it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and she's again one of those women who was a big name for her time, and then kind of like some of the authors and stuff we've studied,
Right.
she's fallen off. But she was one of the famous and most famous American composers of her time, among men or women. So even if you took out the woman part, people knew
Yeah.
her worldwide for what she was doing.
Forest Hills is not just a cemetery. It is a 275-acre storybook. You've got poets like E. E. Cummings and Anne Sexton, composers like Amy Beach, kids like Gracie Allen and Louis Mieusset, and even mini concrete houses that remember the neighbors who lived there.
And as we've said about so many cemeteries, it's still alive in every sense. A working burial ground, an arboretum, an open air museum, and a place where art never stops being made. Forest Hills keeps doing what it was built for, giving people a beautiful place to rest and giving the rest of us a place to remember, to wander, and to wonder. So it is definitely on my bucket list the next time I'm in Boston to go walk through it. It is open year round. They are doing some restoration work in a couple areas I noticed on their website. So if you go check ahead, because they have a couple paths and things closed right now while they're doing the work. But I mean, I can imagine the upkeep for such a large cemetery.
I think the front gate was closed or something. I was looking real quick when you were talking, trying to find pictures, but my goodness, is it just gorgeous.
And they do offer tours at different times. So if you go to their website, it'll tell you when you can take tours with actual guides, but there are self-guided tours, and they have a lot of books that I think are available for purchase right there at the cemetery. So if you wanted to do one of those self-guided tours, you could do that. I did find it really interesting, and I chose not to include it in this episode. But they have a whole they got a grant to start doing research on some of the actual cemetery monuments, so not their sculpture garden, but the monuments themselves, like who designed them, who carved them, who they're for, and they've started to include that on their website. So those were really interesting to read. So especially if you are somebody who is interested in knowing who the sculptors are, the monument carvers, they are putting a lot of research together on those, and they're going through and trying to, at least for now, starting with some of the bigger, more unique pieces and figuring out where they came from, why they were designed the way they were designed, all of that information. So less about the people that are buried with those monuments and more about the monument makers themselves, which I think is really cool that they were able to get a grant to do that. So definitely, like Diana and I have said, a bucket list item for both of us.
Definitely. Can you imagine if, someone just happened to buy us 2 plane tickets to Boston? And it would be so much fun. I mean, we keep talking about this. We've been talking about this for a while now. Just that we could actually travel and do these podcasts live from these places. That's what we keep hoping for, that someday that opportunity will come. So,
and I as I told Diane before we actually started recording, the research I did for this episode was kind of minimal, because I wanted to give an overview of the cemetery, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't include. Like I said, there's more on some of the actual monuments. There's chapels within the cemetery where I didn't even get to that are absolutely gorgeous. So this cemetery there's so much more than we could put in our one little episode. And my hope is that somebody from the cemetery or connected with the cemetery will hear this episode, and get in contact with us. We would love to feature more things about your cemetery, the things that aren't necessarily available for online research, but are important to the cemetery for people to know. But yes, if you are in Boston and you're planning a trip, I mean, there's all the major things to do when you're there, and lots of things to see, but this is definitely something that you should add to your list of sites to see, especially if you're going to go. Maybe, I mean, it's open year round, so you can totally go in the winter. But if you're there during the spring, I am betting, and the weather is pleasant in the fall, this is going to be gorgeous to go in, when the flowers are blooming and the trees are starting, but in the fall when the colors are changing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Just such a pleasant place. And I'm sure they get lots of tourists, but I guarantee you it won't be as overrun as some of the other places that are definitely like tourist traps. This is going to be, if you're looking for something probably a little more peaceful, a little
But
less crazy.
yeah. Well, especially this year, because with the 250
Yeah.
coming, Boston is going to be rather busy.
Yeah,
So
Boston's going to be a crazy place to be.
yeah. So this would be wonderful to walk and just you're walking through history. And I think that's where my little body would be, I think,
Well,
after I
and
saw the tall
I
ships.
mean, this what did we say? 1848 is when it was founded.
1848. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you're still getting a good chunk of American history
Mhm.
in the cemetery, and definitely Boston history, New England, all of that, because the number of people and stories that are buried here, like I said, it's a storybook of a cemetery, but it's just
I like that.
I haven't been there. I've only ever seen pictures of it, but what's there is absolutely gorgeous. So if you are in the Boston area and you've never visited, please go take the time to visit.
Yes,
And if you are visiting, maybe, and you're there long enough, add this as one of those to-dos that maybe you hadn't thought about before.
definitely.
It's totally worth it. So thanks, folks, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about today's episode, visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you'll find additional links in our show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your support helps others find our show and discover all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
You can also follow us on social media for cemetery facts, photos, quotes, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery and on X at Ord Extra Sim. If you'd like to help support us financially, you can donate a cup of coffee by clicking on the coffee cup icon on our website or YouTube, or purchase some of our fabulous Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery merchandise through our store link.
Until we meet again.